Estamos por empezar acá una conferencia que la verdad nos trae mucha alegría. This is not the first time the professor is visited at our house, so that is we make us very happy that you can return and you won't return. Yes. Sabemos que estamos muy lejos, así que quiera venir 2 veces a Uruguay nos parece una victoria. Acabamos de meter un gol, ¿sí? Para empezar, vamos a arrancar con unas palabras de la embajadora Sari. Estamos muy contentos que el embajador pueda visitar nuestra casa de estudio. Nosotros somos muy cercanos a la embajada y a Japón. De hecho, en el 2021 realizamos una semana para festejar los 100 años de las relaciones diplomáticas entre Japón y Uruguay, y tenemos un cerezo que nos da flores todos los años y que nos recuerdan lo fructífera de esa relación. Así que bienvenido a nuestra casa y bienvenido embajador Ferrer, que también nos supo representar por allá, a escuchar nuestra charla.
Professor Pereira, thank you very much for your kind words. And very honored to have Ambassador Ferreira. Thank you very much for coming. And the people of International Business Institute of Catholic University and all the students. Very good morning. And I'm very, very glad that we are having this lecture with such a distinguished academic and actually practitioner, Professor Watanabe. I've known him for many years, since the days of Uruguay round. Uruguay round, I don't know, many of you, maybe it's before you were born, but it was epoch-making trade negotiations that established World Trade Organization, WTO. And I've known him for many years. I know what he likes. He likes to sing, for example, but he didn't come here to sing here today. He came here to give lecture, maybe unfortunately. So if you're interested in hearing his songs, maybe we can arrange another concert of him. But joking aside, very, very grateful for Professor Pereira and Professor Baltasagi and his team, the people of International Business Institute of Catholic University, for organizing this splendid occasion so that we can share his insight based on his experience with us on our international trade agenda. For many Japanese people, the name Uruguay sounds very familiar. I mean, for many Japanese of a certain generation, I would say, that because of the Uruguay round trade negotiations. And he played a very pivotal role in that negotiations. And later, inside the government, he was the chief negotiator of Japan-Mercosur economic partnership agreement, which is a free trade agreement. So he's not only have excellent credentials, academic credentials, but also had wide-ranging and very deep experience as practitioner. Today, I think he will be talking about Japan's trade strategy in the travel world market and the Japan-Latin America relations, enhancing Japan-Mercosur economic partnership. It's a very timely topic because we are now facing a very challenging time. For instance, a strain on the supply chains due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, or some actions of economic erosion in some parts of the world. And under such circumstances, Japan and South America, especially Uruguay, shares fundamental values of democracy and rule of law, and has cooperated on wide-ranging of topics. And last year, President Nakaji visited Japan last October, and had a very, very productive discussion, very productive talk with the Prime Minister Kishida, and they agreed that Japan and Uruguay would strengthen cooperation on wide-ranging areas, from political security to economy and business. And after that, and also he had a very excellent presentation. I mean, President himself, which is quite unusual but the president himself made a very excellent presentation in the JETRO business seminar, emphasizing the charm, attractiveness of Uruguay as investment destination. And since then, there is growing interest among Japanese businesses in doing business with Uruguay. And this July, we had the Keidan-Ren high-level visit. Keidan-Ren is a Japan Business Federation, which is a very powerful business organization. They had a very productive talk with Minister Paganini and also other high-ranking officials. And also we are expecting another mission organized by JETRO, which is a Japanese equivalent of Uruguay 21 in October. That's a business mission to Uruguay. So I hope more and more there'll be more and more interaction of business between Japan and Uruguay. So against this background, I think it's we are very fortunate that we have such an excellent speaker as Professor Watanabe, and so that we can enjoy both his insightful analysis and views on international trading system, and the cooperation between Japan and South America, especially Uruguay. So, well, without further ado, I would like to welcome Professor Watanabe. Thank you very much.
Your Ambassador. Well, I will introduce the professor. I have your resume. I will be unfair because I can't say everything you have done in your life, but el profesor Watanabe es docente de la Universidad de Keio desde el 2005 y ha estado involucrado en las principales negociaciones comerciales bilaterales y multilaterales en las que Japón ha participado en las últimas décadas. Fue subdirector general de la Oficina de Asuntos Económicos del Ministerio de Asuntos Exteriores de Japón desde el 2002 al 2004. Fue jefe de la negociación del Acuerdo de Asociación Económica Japón-México y del Grupo de Trabajo sobre la adhesión de Rusia a la OMC. Ha sido miembro del Grupo de Trabajo sobre la Asociación Económica Japón-India en la Cámara de Comercio e Industria de Japón desde el año 2006. Es candidato a doctor en Relaciones Internacionales por la Universidad Sofía, hermana nuestra, sí es. Y ha escrito un libro que en el 2011 fue uno de los 10 libros más vendidos sobre economía, el libro Asociación Estratégica Transpacífico. Welcome, Professor, and we are really happy to have you here again.
Very much. Let me put my microphone on. Yes. Can you hear me? Oh, yes, that's good. Professora Maria Eugenia Pereira, thank you very much for inviting me here to speak about the trade issues. Distinguished ambassadors, Ambassador of Uruguay to Japan, Excelente Cesar Ferrer, and also our ambassador, Ambassador Asari, and all the distinguished guests here, and young students, ladies and gentlemen. It is great honor and pleasure for me to be here and discuss about international trade issues with you. And the name of your country, thank you very much. The name of your country, Uruguay, as Ambassador put it, it is very familiar with Japanese people because Uruguay round, Ronda de Negociación de Uruguay, that was really the very important step forward, and it's a world common heritage, common asset for everybody, because international trade is a common language, right? Well, whatever, wherever you are, I think the trade is a thing that we can be united. We can make a synergy of industries, agriculture, service elements, and all that. So Uruguay made enormous contribution to this history of international trading system, right? And Japan had a big stake there, and we have been channeling a lot of energy for making of this WTO as a major edifice of international trade. But as you know, WTO is at the jeopardy. It's a problem. So let us do something about it. Okay, and there I'd like to talk about more in concluding part. Japan and Mercosur countries, particularly Uruguay, we could do something together. And I'm telling the same thing to Japanese young people, young students, because there are some skepticism about this world training system. Because obvious reasons, United States, after Mr. Trump's coming into power, into White House, there has been a quite significant degree of skepticism about the efficiency of WTO. But of course, WTO is not a perfect organization. What we have to do is we have to build up together, and we have to make new inputs. But since after establishment of WTO in 1995, we have been sort of fading all the time. The Doha development agenda didn't work so well. So now we have bits and pieces of preferential agreement, regional agreements. But the idea that I'm today presenting to you is that those bits and pieces of FTAs, there are something like 260 FTAs all around the world. And FTAs originally used to be considered as an exception to most favored nation treatment, that is the source of multilateralism. So what could we do? You see, that you would see towards the end of my expose. Well, let's move on. This is today's content. So I'd like to show you some kind of prelude showing some major uncertainties that we are all surrounded, and then some Japanese solution to it. First, I'd like to mention that those two things, Brexit, that is a national referendum in Great Britain in 2016, and also the US presidential election in 2016. So 2016, you agree with me, that was quite sort of, the change over the streams, you see. Then you see Mr. Prime Minister of UK, he is holding the breath. You see, he never thought that there would be a vote in favor of leaving European Union. And that is already the kind of sign of very, problematic sort of symptoms. And then we have in November 2016, the Mr. Trump's, victory in the presidential election. And then all things started. You see, I put this slide. Trump puts protectionism at the heart of US economic policy. And most phenomenal thing that he has done is withdrawal of the United States from the TPP. And you certainly know that TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, that Mr. Obama's administration has been engaged for many years to create 21st century type of trading rules and better market access and all that. So you see the criticizing US decision to leave TPP, Mr. McCain, late Mr. McCain, he said there's a serious mistake. And unfortunately, the United States left this very important, once called golden standard by Hillary Clinton. The US left the TPP, and that leaving enormous kind of vacuum in the region of Asia Pacific. So, and also, he didn't like NAFTA, so NAFTA has been replaced by what they call USMCA, United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, and the degree of liberalism of trade has been much reduced in this USMCA, replacing NAFTA. Why the, yes, Brexit matters to Japan. As you see, the Japanese enterprises have been very largely deployed in United Kingdom. And United Kingdom, since it used to be part of the European Union. So all these big names like Toyota, Sony, Nissan, and Canon, or others, they established the points of local production so that they could avoid the imposition of very high duties of European Union. You know how much percentage of auto import, European Union charges is 10%, you see. And for the electric appliances, such as plasma TV, say it's 14%. It's very high percentage of duties that they impose. So in order to avoid such tariff imposition, Japanese companies decided to invest massively in the United Kingdom, and that was at the invitation of Madame Thatcher. You see, Madame Thatcher told Japanese companies to come in to UK, and that was to provide some, the jobs in UK, but also for Japanese side, it was quite sort of constructive effort to mitigate the EU-Japan trade frictions. You see, so the FDI was a part of remedies to bring in for the Japan EU trade frictions. Let's move on. So next slide, I just give you some idea how widely scattered those Japanese companies around inside the European Union member states. So the FDI was very important. And maybe you see the, since customs union, the EU it was, so maybe the same way of thinking that since Mercosur maintains that it is customs union, perhaps we could think in that way. Perhaps we could invest inside the Mercosur countries, for instance, Uruguay, so that Japanese companies can take advantage of, duty-free export from one country to another within Mercosur. So you see, that has been the quite positive phenomena for us and also for the rest of the world that we have been conducting that kind of the exercise of building up supply chain or production network. But unfortunately, we have a number of troubles. We have the earthquake in 2011, and we have also the the U.S.-China trade frictions, and also Corona. And after that, we have the war in Ukraine. So the GVC stands for Global Value Chain. That has been largely disputed and disrupted by number of events such as earthquake, Corona, U.S.-China economic frictions, and now we have war in Ukraine. So those are the elements that we have to take into consideration, how to keep global supply chain in order to be faced with and overcome this kind of zigzag and challenges ahead. So trade concerns in the post-COVID-19 era could be mentioned in 3 ways. One is economic security. Economic security is becoming very, very troublesome because companies, they try to shut down for export and import. And as you see, the semiconductor in particular, the shortage of that adversely affecting auto production worldwide, not only auto production, but also other electric appliances, even the water boiler to make hot water. And in Japan, the rate of new building for apartments have been decreased because the boiler to make hot water, there was a stagnation in production. Why? Because the chips, the semiconductors they needed, it was not easy to find. So not only in the very sophisticated machinery or cars, but also other electric appliances have been adversely affected by the shortage of semiconductors. And also, the rare metal that is necessary for the electric vehicles. For instance, rare metal scarcity and also tightened control resulting in short supply in importing countries, etc. And in order to cope with that kind of situation, the United States started to establish entity list, and 152 firms listed in relation to Huawei, the Chinese producer. And also United States produced this list of denied person list. That's persona non grata. And there was the entire export and import controls. And you have also carbon neutrality. That's the second concern that the world business they have to bear in mind. So the information disclosure via CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, 9,600 companies disclosed in 2020. Reduction of greenhouse gas, GHG, carbon tax to prevent carbon leakage, and EU to introduce carbon tax as 1st January 2023, raising a lot of concerns, including Japan, elsewhere in relation to WTO rules. Thirdly, human rights and labor standard, linkage between human rights and external economic policies being established, forced labor, slavery, child labor, harassment, sanctions against human rights abuse. So due diligence has been very much required for the conduct of sound business administrations. Let's come back to semiconductors. Semiconductors, that is the main battlefield, I would think. And there are 3 points. Number one, a number of new factories being established between the years 2019 and 2021, compared to 2022 and 2024. So it's a future. This coming up number of new factories producing semiconductors. As you see, in China, phenomenal decrease, Taiwan as well. But in the Western nations such as USA, Japan, EU, ROK, Republic of Korea, it is, ASEAN, it's quite, the visible increase in the making of new factories. So how should we interpret it? I mean, we all used to dependent largely on supply from China, but those countries like USA, Japan, are now ready to increase its production of semiconductor. So accordingly, there is a decrease of export of semiconductors made in China to a lesser degree. And so production capacity increasingly enhanced in Japan and also United States and the EU. But we have another problem, you see, in regard of that. That is state interventionism. That is very kind of harmful in the long run. Maybe in the short run, it is quite encouraging for certain specific industries, but in the long run, it could be very, very dangerous for the entire health of national economies. That's why we have in WTO, we have the subsidy code, we have countervailing duties code to counter against the effect of subsidies. If it is too much, we could make a recourse to countervailing duties. So interventionism is quite phenomenal in these years. As you see, this is the picture of domestic production of semiconductors via subsidies. So you see, in case of Japan is something like 13.67 billion, In the US, it's 39 billion, and EU, this amount, and China, by all means, it's a very big amount of subsidies being provided. So it's actually the kind of competition going on in terms of state interventionism. And this is very, very unhealthy for domestic economy as well as international one. Third element is export control and import ban. And here, the sort of picture here, the both the Western powers and China, they are in conflict. China, exercises its export restriction on the rare metal, rare earths, such as cadmium or germanium, whereas the Western powers gathered together with the United States, also the Netherlands and Japan. Those are the three countries where the machinery to produce semiconductors are quite competitive. So those Western powers try to restrict export of machinery to produce semiconductors to China. So altogether, that is quite a negative impact. This also goes against the WTO principle of prohibition of quantitative restrictions. So you see, the world is really getting into trouble. But as you see, nowadays, United States and China, there seems to be also kind of positive development since, say, June this year. Mr. Blinken of United States State Secretary visited China. And his visit was followed by Madame Yellen of US Treasury. And also the lady Commerce Secretary also visited there. And they are trying to pave way to make the summit meeting, perhaps maybe on the occasion of APEC summit meeting, sometime in November this year. So perhaps, you see, the Mr. Xi Jinping and Mr. Biden will meet to discuss and try to rationalize, try to ameliorate the negative impact of this kind of competitions in the field of semiconductor and maybe beyond that. So hopefully we would move on to that kind of phase in next year. But there are some very preoccupying scenarios. Global economy increasingly fragmented, and those scenarios put forward by METI, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan. Scenario one, when each side imposes additional non-tariff barriers equivalent to the tariff increase during the US-China trade war 2018-2019, the impact on GDP in 2030 would be minus 2.3%, roughly 2.7 trillion US dollars. And scenario two is even more, worrisome. Then this kind of possible loss would be even bigger. So the process of decoupling is the big downside risk to the growth of the world economy. Therefore, this year in the summit, G7 summit in Hiroshima, they agreed that instead of using decoupling, they want to reduce it to decoupling. But essentially, they are just the same. It's maybe the question of rhetoric, you see. Now, the G7 leaders are increasingly aware of the negative side, downside effect of such decoupling or fragmentation. So that's good, okay? So let's move on. What we could do in addition. This is just to show you some idea, the risking in the place of decoupling, a big question whether Europe can still go green without China. You see, China's minerals, China mines 70% of rare earth concentrates. China processes 87% and refines 91%. rare earth metals are used in permanent magnets, 94% of which are made in China. So, all this suggests that we cannot completely cut off the supply from China, but what we could do is perhaps diversify the source of import of those key components and key raw materials. Okay, so EU already established some, the measures. Those are the 4 of them. Enforcement regulation for trade disputes came into force February 2021. International procurement instrument. EU is very much interested in government procurement. Foreign subsidies regulation, somewhat to control the subsidies. And most recently, anti-economic coercion instrument that has been in place since August 2023. So Europe is preparing itself, but the problem is its unilateral nature. EU has announced unilateral instruments without consulting with, say, Japan, with other countries, Mercosur countries. So I think this kind of unilateralism is also quite wary, quite preoccupying, together with United States, American unilateralism. Okay, so let's move on. How Japan, try to cope with this kind of problems? Our attitude towards international trade is our devices, policies should be rule-based. See, maybe WTO is the first place to begin with. And then this WTO, our commitment to WTO should be complemented by our EPAs, Economic Partnership Agreements. So just to give you some idea how we develop these Economic Partnership Agreement. Japan's, the usage of those regional agreements that came only after the first years of 21st century. Before that, Japan always tried to conduct its trade policy only on the basis of GATT and WTO multilateral system. And Japan was even, raised questions whether those regional agreements are incompatible with WTO or not, see. But the reality of the world economy, particularly in the area of East Asia, there is a kind of emerging supply chain because of the major exchange rate replenishment. And that was what we know of Plaza Accord. Plaza Accord was the first major exchange rate realignment. And Americans and Europeans, they have been criticizing Japan because Japanese yen has been undervalued. And that adds the artificial competitiveness on Japanese goods. So in order to mitigate the situation, they asserted a lot of pressure to revalue Japanese yen and devalue US dollars. And that is what happened in the Plaza Accord. Prior to Plaza Accord, one US dollar was something like 248, 250 yen to $1. But after that, it became 180 yen to $1. So about 25% of revaluation of Japanese yen. And this revaluation of Japanese yen could produce the situation for Japanese goods in terms of international competitiveness is a negative ramifications. So in order to mitigate such negative influence and ramifications of appreciated Japanese yen, Japanese companies, particularly those producing parts and components for cars and electric appliances, they made FDI, foreign direct investment in Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, and other ASEAN countries, including even Singapore. to produce those parts and components. In the case of car industry, like diesel engine in Thailand and the engine parts, condensers in Malaysia, and so forth. And then those parts and components have been traded across the national boundaries of ASEAN. ASEAN stands for Association of Southeast Asian Nations, 10 countries. And Japan continued to provide the high value added sophisticated engine machineries, parts and components like gearbox from Japan to, say, those countries in ASEAN. And Thailand became very much interested in attracting the price for assembly of cars and other electric appliances. So the Thailand became very important sort of core of this production networking. So little by little, you see, there was the the Japan's or Japanese companies' reaction to much appreciated Japanese yen, and that I would call de facto business-driven integration. The European Union, on the other hand, that was a de jure integration. They established the European Commission and also ministerial, the Council of Europe, sorry, not Council of Europe, sorry, European Council, and also the Council of Ministers. Those institutions created the common market of European Union. But in the case of Asia, it started with FDI of the Japanese companies in order to mitigate the negative ramifications of higher Japanese yen. So market integration in Asia Pacific, it's a kind of summing up. The Plaza Accord was an ignition key and de facto business-driven integration through FDI, establishing supply chain production networks in the region. And FTA EPA had been requested by those companies to consolidate such merits of de facto integration. So from bilateral EPAs like Japan, Malaysia, Japan, Thailand, Japan, Philippines, and so forth. But beyond that, they went to this wider regional FTA EPAs like ASEAN plus 3. 3, by that we mean Japan, China, Korea, and ASEAN plus 6, so additional 3 countries, so the Australia, New Zealand, and India. So now we have ASEAN plus 6 called RCEP. RCEP is also very important economic sort of institution that was originally proposed by Japan, bearing in mind the original Chinese proposal of ASEAN plus 3. In ASEAN plus 3, China could be, massively preponderant. So Japan's idea was bringing in India, that could, balance, you see, the presence of China in wider spectrum. And also we asked Australia and New Zealand to join because they are not Asian country, they are, Oceania, but they're, those 2 countries are deeply rooted democracies, you see. So Japan's idea was bringing in those 3 countries in addition to ASEAN plus 3 in year 2006, you see, 2 years later. So now RCEP is on the basis of this ASEAN plus 6. Then we have several others like first bilateral EPAs and intra-regional wider FTA EPAs and going beyond. And that is the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, beyond regional ones. And after United States withdrawal from TPP, Japan maintained this, results that we got in TPP. So, even after US departure, there was Japan's effort made to keep momentum in the form of TPP 11, 12 minus 1. Okay, and that is now in force since December 2018. So this is the list of achievement by Japan in terms of bilateral EPAs. And as you see, the first one we started with Singapore. Singapore is free trade, free port. So it was kind of easy, but that's to make our mentality, nourish our mentality to negotiate EPA, because we have been solely committed to WTO type multilateralism. So bilateral trade negotiation, Japan was not so much familiarized. So we needed that kind of exercise with Singapore, and Singapore was a perfect partner for that. But the second, the EPA that we negotiated, that was Mexico. At that time already, Mexico has a number of bilateral FTAs, including the one with EU. And also before that, they have already NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. So Mexico was quite a veteran, and Japan was quite a novice. So it was, the very difficult negotiation. And Mexico wanted to increase their pork meat export to Japan, and pork, beef, those are very sensitive area. So we need a lot of efforts to talk with our domestic constituencies. So after 23 consecutive months, we went to Mexico City. They came to Tokyo, almost 2 years, and then we reached, fortunately, agreement in substance. And this agreement came into force April 2005. You see, when we started the negotiations, there were about 330 Japanese companies present in Mexico. But you know how many companies now in Mexico? We have above 1,400. So a lot of investment coming into Mexico, and that pushes up Mexico's production of cars even higher than Brazil in earlier times. So that was good example for us to continue our EPA negotiations. So we have Malaysia, Chile, and all that. And with Chile FTA, Chile took advantage of this, and their Chilean wine overwhelmed consumption of French wine in Japan. So French is competing now with Chile. But thanks to, again, Japan-EU EPA, all European wines are coming in, you see. So we have all wines from Europe. We have wine from Australia, from Chile. So we could be, quite with nice beef and pork and all that. So I think, the free trade agreement provides the choice for consumers. You see, those who would like to have French wine, those who prefer New Zealand wine, Australian wine, they could do that, you see. So that's a merit of free trade. You see, the variety in the choice of consumers. Okay, so we have been doing that. And after that, we have also this is also quite important. I'd like to draw your attention to this slide. This is to show you the components of our EPA. Of course, the FTA, Free Trade Agreement, always in the central part of EPA. It's a traditional FTA, but that would be complemented by agreement or chapters on government procurement, movement of natural persons. For instance, in that, the Brazil, no, not Brazil, I'm sorry, Vietnam, then Indonesia, and the Philippines, they can send their nurses and care workers to Japan, you see, because we need them, right? So the movement of natural persons is also providing a lot of good things to Japan. And also the other side of the table, they also enjoy that. Competition policy coordination or cooperation, and also the bilateral oh, sorry, this is a business environment. So improvement of business environment once the investment would be done, and then bilateral agreement, and most importantly, perhaps the chapter on investment. So those are the component of EPA, and we'd like to have the similar component with Mercosur countries. Right. So in addition to bilateral ones, we have plurilateral, we have multilateral agreement, and one is TPP. TPP, original TPP of 12 countries, that was agreed in October in Atlanta, USA, and signed in February 2016. Important thing is that tariff elimination, of course, that's the kind of central part of TPP, and almost 100% duty elimination in industrial products, and even in agriculture, 97.1% elimination of duties. We have several new rules, particularly important. What is important is SOEs. SOE stands for state-owned enterprises. So state-owned enterprises, they often give more favor to state-owned enterprises in comparison with the foreign companies. So try to make the level playing field. SOE disciplines has been first introduced to TPP, and regulation on non-commercial assistance by government. And when the negotiators are engaged in the negotiation of SOEs, they had China in their mind. You see, of course, we have Vietnam, Malaysia, and Singapore, and they have, even Singapore has a very influential state enterprise, that's Thammasat. So we could deal with, those the state-owned enterprises, but the negotiators were already foresaw the possibility of big country with state-owned enterprise, and that is China. So without talking about China, they had in mind and elaborating and stipulating the rules on SOEs, they had China in mind, you see. So China was hidden agenda, you see, in the CPTPP. So when Mr. Blinken, as vice chair, what is this? The secretary of state, he came to Japan in October 2015, right after this. And then he made very clear that TPP is not the new China containment. If China meets the standard of TPP, they could join. And the more, the merrier. That is the principle of the free trade. So Mr. Blinken's statement was very well received in Japan, but also in China. So in China, people started to think about the Chinese participation in TPP in order that China could graduate from the present situation, particularly try to come out from the what we call this middle income country trap, you see. So some progressive people in China, in making policies in Beijing, they thought that perhaps our CEP is good, but that is not enough. So they could complement with TPP, and they can use negotiation with TPP as a kind of external pressure to restructure Chinese economy. See, that was the thinking in 2015, 2016. But unfortunately, Mr. Trump came in and whole picture has been changed. You can ask the opinion of Chinese participation to Mr. Blinken now. He has completely different view, you see. Even worse is Mr. Sullivan of White House. He says, against the principle of market economy, free trade, and all that. So, unfortunate that we cannot go on the discussion like that. But I'd like to, I'd like to stress that what is important is perhaps we would look into China, inside China, and we could support those progressive people within China, try to help them to counter those people who are resisting against market power, market economy principles. Anyway, so that's the kind of political economy of TPP and CPTPP. Then let's move on. The U.S. withdrawal, China became very sort of the backward thinking, take advantage of U.S. withdrawal from rulemaking and trade and investment. They would make some infringement even in the WTO rules. So, and also China itself lost its incentives to enhance FTAs. So in China, those progressive people, they have been, replaced by more by believers of state-owned enterprises. So China lost further liberalization in line with market economy. So instead, China accelerated the One Belt, One Road or Belt and Road initiatives by making full use of AIIB as well as the BRICS Bank and all that to counter the United States and others. So market economy principles have been jeopardized and irreversibly pushed back and diminished, if not completely abandoned. So it's a major crisis for the democracy in the region. So how does Japan deal with uncertainties? The CPTPP, replacing TPP-12, Japan maintained the intent and content of TPP, original TPP, persuading 10 other members, like particularly Asian members like Vietnam and Malaysia. Some 20 provisions dealing with IPRs, intellectual property rights, have been suspended because those are largely at the US insistence. So we just put into the fridge those US requests on the IPRs. But no substantial change, this is very important, no substantial change in the market access deals. So, Japan tried to design the TPP-11 to such a way that if United States wants to come back, this US return could be facilitated. See, that was the idea. So that came into force towards the end of 2018. So it's there, and now United Kingdom joined this TPP-11. So it's now TPP-12 with United Kingdom joining us. So we have also Japan-US trade talks under Mr. Trump, because Trump wanted to just make sure that United States will keep the results of negotiation between United States and Japan under the TPP, which has been agreed in Atlanta, October 2015. So this is a kind of exercise to safeguard what United States got in terms of market accessing goods from Japan during the TPP negotiations, which ended up in 2016. So that was okay. So US was happy, and there was the diplomatic sort of statement done after the summit meeting between Mr. Abe, late Mr. Abe of Japan, and Mr. Trump on September 26. Joint statement being declared, But that was interesting. That's a typical case of diplomatic paper out exercise. That's the way I put it. The US President, Mr. Trump, could sell the bilateral meeting as a success in persuading Japan to engage in the bilateral talks that Japan had been constantly rejecting. Japan prefers more multilateral approach, but Mr. Trump rejected this multilateral approach. Instead, he wanted the bilateral ones. So you see, he could play up this Japan-US, the summit meeting as an example of his success in persuading Japan to engage in bilateral trade talks. And while Japanese Prime Minister Mr. Abe could demonstrate to the domestic constituencies that his government position had not been changed despite the strong US pressure, that is to cope with the agriculture protectionism, you see. So he didn't concede any new agricultural compromise in agreement with the United States. So once the talks started in early 2019, US brought up a number of market access requests, while Japan dealt with US with a wish list in line with TPP 12 that both countries had previously agreed in the bilateral negotiations. So TAG is a trade agreement on goods. Sorry. Trade agreement on goods could be a useful platform to bring the US back to TPP. So we will see. But so far, as you know, in Washington, D.C., unfortunately, trade is not tabled or for those congressmen and Senate. Unfortunately, there's no place of trade. And maybe next year the presidential election will put even severe, case for international trade. So that's RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. I already explained ASEAN plus Japan, China, Korea, plus the Australia and New Zealand. And interestingly enough, India left when the RCEP was almost agreed. Why? Because India is very much afraid of China's sort of penetration into Indian market thanks to this RCEP free trade agreement. So India left, but the India has never been a free trade country. They are very interested in exporting their talented people as labor from India to outside. But India, in terms of market access in manufactured products, they are not really interested in opening up. Okay, so RCEP is now 15 countries instead of 16. Then you see this is the significance of participation in RCEP, and concrete example here. Japanese automobile company based in Thailand imports engine parts, transmissions from Japan, and assembles those parts and components coming from other countries in East Asia, and assemble the cars and export from Thailand to Australia, or even some part like Nissan March. March is the smallest subcompact car. They export back to Japan. The same thing happened here. The elevator machinery, they produce that in Thailand and send it to India. So it's quite well developed the production networking. Yeah. Then yes, this is to show you that thanks to RCEP, we have FTA, de facto FTA with China and Korea. So RCEP has a certain meaning for that. Now, those are one of the final part of slide. Thank you for the patience. Maybe 5 more minutes, then I wrap up. So this is to show you how Japan will organize its EPA strategy from now on. So we have done more than 15 bilateral EPAs across Asia. And now we have RCEP, it's already concluded. We have also TPP concluded and came into force. And Japan is member too, both. And RCEP and TPP, quite different character. RCEP is more friendly with developing countries like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. So it's a more embracing, you see, the integration approach to bring in those latecomers in ASEAN to the picture of Asian economic integration, whereas TPP is more developed countries type and rule-based sort of agreement and high level of market access altogether. So here we have now USMCA in the place of NAFTA, and here we have Mercosur. So together with Mercosur countries, perhaps what we could do is at the end of the day, APEC-wide FTA. APEC is Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, started in 1989. So the APEC-wide FTA, called FTAAP, FTAP, Free Trade Area of Asia Pacific, would be the goal for APEC. So there are 2 avenues. One is TPP and the other is RCEP to create this APEC-wide EPA or free trade area of 21 member economies, including Taiwan, including Hong Kong. Those are 2 economies belonging to APEC. So you see, this is a way that we could move on, right? And there, I'd like to bring in Mercosur countries so that Mercosur countries would be joining this dynamism of Asia and Pacific, and also this production networking that would certainly be beneficial for Mercosur countries. Well, so the idea is altogether, it's a multilateralization of regional endeavors, regional institutions, convergence of liberalization efforts by 3 mega FTAs. TPP 11 is one, Japan-EU EPA, and RCEP. New momentum to reinforce trade multilateralism embodied in the WTO rulemaking, in the digital trade, cooperation in the WTO reform discussions, including dispute settlement. Japan and Mercosur countries should work together. Mercosur countries constitute for us last remaining piece of jigsaw puzzle we'd like to fill in. So this is another sort of sketchy figure that I'd like to share with you. So we have 3 mega regions, Europe, gathered around European Union. And North America, we have USMCA and some remainder of NAFTA. In addition, in South America, we have Mercosur and Alianza del Pacífico on the Pacific side. Finally, we have East Asia, and East Asia, we have RCEP. So between the big regions, say between East Asia and Americas, we have APEC as a kind of Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation that is a non-binding forum to enhance more freer trade, freer investment. Now we have TPP to move forward. And TPP is certainly the very legally minded structure that's with full of legal obligations. That's same thing here between Europe and East Asia. ASEM, very much similar sort of thinking with APEC. APEC and ASEM, they are non-binding. But we have now Japan-EU EPA that covers about 30% of world trade and 1/3 of the global GDP, and that is certainly the legally binding thing. See, and in addition, we have in addition to Japan-EU EPA, we have Japan-EU Strategic Partnership Agreement, which is political cooperation agreement. So then, in this way, we have EU-Japan TPP level, RCEP, where Japan has been actively involving. So what I would do, say I propose this the multilateralizing regionalism, is that we have TPP, we have Japan-EU, and we have created new rules. So, and also in RCEP, so we could bring back those new issues such as digital agreement back to WTO. So it used to be the case that we agreed the Uruguay round negotiations, we agreed the Tokyo round negotiation, and try to bring them down to the member states of WTO, member countries of WTO. But now it's instead of top to bottom, it's a bottom-up approach. So we have a number of new agreements in the form of TPP in the Japan-EU EPA and also RCEP. So let's make kind of a critical mass of like-minded countries belonging to those regional initiatives and bring them back to WTO. See, so this is a way to keep momentum for WTO, using all kinds of the agreements so far we have achieved with our counterparts, our like-minded friends. So this is the final slide. TPP 12 that could be described as a template for 21st century trade agreements. TPP 11, now TPP with CPTPP with United Kingdom to keep momentum for free trade in Asia Pacific, and RCEP for updating the production network in East Asia. Japan-EU EPA, the major interregional mega FTA connecting East Asia and Europe with or via Japan. Japan-Mercosur EPA to be further explored as a subsequent policy agenda, joint study group that we could start to engage us for further, the preparation for formal negotiation between Japan on one hand and Mercosur countries on the other, so that we could maintain and strengthen trade multilateralism embodied in the WTO. Thus, we could contribute more predictability and resilience in international trade. So thank you very much for your participation. So thank you very much. I'd like to
thank you, Professor. You managed to talk all the important topics of trade in just 1 hour. So I admire you. We have a few minutes to maybe a short question for the public. I know you have another class after this, so maybe if somebody wants to make a short question over there. Sí, 2 segundos.
Hola, ahora sí. Professor, now yes. Thank you for being here. I have a personal question for you. What do you see of unique in Uruguay in the resources of or workforce that Japan is interested in making business with Uruguay or maybe investing in the future? Where do you see the focus?
I think Uruguay, together with other countries like Paraguay as well, you have enormous, potentiality, and this potentiality has never been really fully exploited yet. And the graduate of this university, you are the elites of this country. And if we could develop more profound bilateral cooperation, bilateral relations through EPA, Economic Partnership Agreement, because Economic Partnership Agreement has a chapter on people-to-people contact and cooperation. And we could enhance more the exchange of young people, university students, and also, replenish the kind of workforce exchange. Because you see, the nurses and care workers is just a example of the opening up of Japanese labor market. But Japan is suffering from the scarcity of younger population. So we need the people coming from abroad. And since Uruguay has enormous potentials, and also the educational level and quality of labor force is very high, and your average age is much younger than the case in Japan. So I think despite the distance, despite the long distance, I hope that you would be more interested in Japan, and you push your government to be engaged in the bilateral negotiations with Japan, and you could come to Japan, and hope that we will do that the other way around too, so that that could be a win-win in terms of people-to-people contact and bilateral cooperation in human exchange. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Another question? Short question?
This one, there are...
Hi. Thanks for being here, Professor.
Thank you.
Short question.
Yes.
What key obstacles does Japan faces when investing in Uruguay or in other Mercosur countries, given the, sometimes economic troubles sometimes we have?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very
Thanks.
much. Usually short question is more penetrating question, difficult to answer. But yes, I don't think it is very much with Uruguay, but in some countries within Mercosur, those government regulations and rules that can be frequently changed overnight sometimes. And the Japanese company would be obliged to cope with this kind of sudden changes. And this is a costly exercise. So hopefully within Mercosur countries, I hope that you could change that kind of thing, so that frequent mandatory changes should be avoided, particularly affecting negatively the incoming foreign direct investments, the one coming from Japan, for instance. Yeah, and also in terms of negotiation with Mercosur, I don't know to what extent Mercosur is really one economic entity. When we negotiated with European Union, we could dealt with European Union member countries, 28 of them as one entity. And those 28 member countries had been represented by European Commission. So it was easy, despite the fact that they have number of member states, but Japanese government negotiated only with European Commission. Of course, we did a lot of démarches, try to make good cooperation with member states, each of them. But since it's a customs union, we respected that European Commission is a sole agent for negotiations. But in the case of Mercosur, we don't know from who we negotiate, you see. So hope that, smaller countries like Uruguay and Paraguay will get together and try to make the streamlined structure for future negotiation on EPA with Japan. In the case of European Union, the Benelux countries, those are very small countries, they get together as a kind of nucleus driving force of integration. I think Uruguay, by all means, and maybe with Paraguay, you could foster this kind of velocity of integration, so that it would facilitate Japan and maybe other countries to discuss future trade agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Les agradecemos al público si pueden escanear el código QR que aparece en la pantalla para evaluar la posibilidad. Y vamos a darle la última pregunta al embajador.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. It's great to listen to you again. Professor, just a small, brief question. Uruguay has made an application to join the CPTPP. I would like any comment from you in regard with that.
Thank you very much. As I said, in the international trade, the principle is the more, the merrier. In order to enhance the effectiveness of free trade, if we have more members, we could enlarge the benefits of those, the economic integration. So, by all means, we should welcome the new members, such country as Uruguay. But again, what I told this young gentleman, that we have to make sure that with whom we are negotiating. So yes, if Uruguay joins CPTPP, that means that Uruguay will establish particular trade relationship with CPTPP 11 countries or 12 countries. So that means, that implies that Uruguayan position is rather unique, but at the same time undefined in its relationship to Mercosur, because Mercosur is a common market and you are supposed to be united with, as a one trading unit, and you share the common trade policy with other countries. So you join CPTPP, does it mean that you are alienating yourself from the rest of Mercosur? That kind of legal questions, you see, we have to be prepared to answer. So yes, Uruguayan, participation in CPTPP is something very positive, but we have to think about how we could make consistency with WTO rules, because Japan has been promoting all those FTAs, EPAs, but always we said that those FTAs, EPAs are complementary to our WTO efforts, you see. So, I hope, your expertise and experience, you could discuss with your government people, and hope that not only your own government people, but also others like Brazil, Argentina, and come up with a clear answer. Well, thank you very much indeed, Ambassador, Excellency.